Oh my God, bless my eyes. Is that who I think it is? Is my podcast co-host actually back from the dead? Chris, you're here. Oh my God.
Yeah, what's up, guys? It's been a while. I missed you all so much. I missed you as well, Dom, and I'm really happy to be here today and talk about an incredible TV show.
Oh man, me too. Dude, like I said, I am as much as I was looking forward to the movie that we were supposed to do originally, I think we made the right decision here ultimately.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We always do. So,
Well, tomato, tomato. But we're here to talk about Arcane, the new show on Netflix that is blowing up the interwaves right now. All of that and more. Stay tuned. Well, Chris, the cycle continues because once again, Netflix has pulled something out that has not only destroyed every single possible expectation that really anybody could have for it, but also quite possibly proved to be one of the best media things in general, not just this year, but like of the last 5 years. Like we've been seeing this weird renaissance lately of incredible animated stuff this year, like that really started back in March with Invincible. But like, real quick before we actually like start to talk about this, like, obviously did you see this one coming? Because like obviously it's Netflix. They don't market anything. Whenever they have a hit on their hands, it comes out of nowhere, like with Squid Game in general, right? I swear to God, we're going to need like a marketing analyst just to like predict the next Netflix thing that's going to come out of the pipeline, because I'm swear to God, I'm sick and tired of these things sneaking up on me like this, because it makes it very, very annoying on a planning standpoint.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where the obvious answer is no. No one saw it coming except for maybe like the League of Legends community who were told about this thing like 6 years ago and that
6 years?
seems to be about it too. So it's just like no one I don't think anyone saw it coming, but I'm really glad that it's here.
Yeah, for real, dude. Like I said, you're back finally after a long time. We were originally going to do West Side Story on this podcast, and then I was talking to Chris behind the scenes, and I was like, Chris, you're coming back. I'm like, dude, this show was so much better than I could have possibly thought. We got to do Arcane. And you were, and then you were like, put it this. So Chris, you started watching this after both me and Professor Pat recommended it. And if Pat's recommending something animated, you know that this has got to be something really good. And what was it that Pat said? I think was his basic general pitch is that wow, it's almost like they actually paid someone to actually write a story. And what do you know? It's actually like really
Yeah.
good. Craziness,
Well,
right?
last weekend, I came out of my hibernation and actually saw human beings again. I went and hung out with Professor Pat and some other friends of ours from the film school days, but not friends of the show, so they will not be named here. And Pat said outside of the theater after watching Ghostbusters, which was a fine film, he said, "I think I just don't like movies anymore, and that's a problem because I teach them." And then he said, "And also, I think I just don't like media anymore, and that's a problem because I teach it." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Because nothing's great anymore." He said, "I'm sick of saying things are fine." And then I brought up this show, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's a really good one." So sometimes he eats his own words, but out of frustration, I completely understand with him with what he's saying.
Right? I mean, like you said, this year in general, right? This is the year of like, give me back my money as far as movies go, right? Like I said, one of the biggest kind of regrets that I've had with this show is pushing you to watch as many movies in the theaters as they have, because besides just us returning back to some semblance of normalcy, whatever that is, it just feels like every single movie has been just mediocre. And it kills me to see that, because this is a medium that I love. This is a medium that really has given me life for like these last 20 years of my existence. And now to see it fall so far, to see it become so disposable, to see it just become like nothing more than content, it's depressing to say the least, which again is why it's so refreshing but also equally so irritating when something so good like this comes out on a streaming platform like Netflix. It is such a niche property, really. I mean, you could talk more about the League of Legends property once we actually get into it. And then it comes out, not only does it turn out to be like just fucking amazing from a visual and a craft standpoint, but it's easily like one of the best stories that we've gotten in years, just in general, if we're just talking about it from a storytelling standpoint. So I guess with that being said, I feel like that's a good transition into really our first topic of this podcast, which is what the hell is Arcane and League of Legends? And like, where did this thing come from and why is this thing so awesome? It's a little bit of a conglomeration, but base general summary, Arcane basically takes place in a fantasy world based off the League of Legends games. Chris, you'll have to talk more about that because I know literally nothing about those games at all. centers around kind of the conflict and struggles between the two different societies that are kind of built on top of each other. At least in this one region, you have the more rich, kind of upper class, prosperous Piltover, and the lesser kind of like lower down in the dumps, more equally shat upon Zaun, basically. And these two nations have kind of been in like this really uneasy truce for the last couple of years throughout the course of the series since Zaun attempted to rebel at the beginning of the show. The majority of the show focuses on two sets of characters. One, a set of sisters that were brought up in Zaun, Vi and Powder, who later becomes to be known as Jinx. And then two people in the Piltover realm, Jace and Victor, who are attempting to experiment around with magic and it's blending with technology in order to kind of make their society better. So already off the ground running, we're already kind of introduced to like this fantasy-esque, Game of Thrones-esque, like kind of class struggle already to begin with. And that's before we even get into the characters, which, Chris, I'm just going to put this up front right now. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that we've already made our opinions on this well known, but these are easily like some of the best, most fleshed out three-dimensional characters that I've seen of really anything in general so far this year. So like with that as just a base summary, Chris, break down like your thoughts on what you thought going into this, like before you heard anything versus after watching the first couple episodes to now.
Sure. Well, before I do that, a little tease while we wait for my thoughts. I had a thought, which was I think it'd be really cool if I sort of said hello to the audience again. What's up, guys? I know it's been a while, and did my typical asking them to do the one thing they can do for us that will always help, that will always be free, which is hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn that bell on for notifications. And I'll say it one more time since I know it's been a while. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and turn the bell on for notifications. We are having a bunch of meetings to plan out for 2022. We have a lot on the horizon here with Talking TV. One hacked Instagram will not keep us down. And with that being said, please go follow our new Instagram at the official Talking TV podcast. And of course, stay up to date with everything we do. And we really appreciate you guys being here. It's good to be back. And so, yeah, with that being said, let's talk about Arcane, the characters, the universe, and we'll obviously transition later on into how it does tie into the League of Legends game. But that's really not as important as the show. So we'll start there. I think it's so. I know I started off sort of singing a little bit of the praises, and I think it's perfect that it falls in the year that it does, the year, I would say, of piss poor storytelling, because it's not really that groundbreaking. I mean, it's your generic structure. It's the origin story in the first 3 episodes, the father figure of the ruffians and the forgotten and the downtrodden who takes them all in and sort of gives them a guiding light in this city that doesn't shine upon the part where they live in. We've seen it before. It feels like a generic D&D campaign. Like, it really does feel like, oh, cool, we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons for the first time. John's going to DM this one. He's never told a story before, but he read children's books growing up. At the surface level, it is a little drag and drop, copy and paste. But that's okay, because the way that they build the characters inside of it, paired with what I think is really the selling point, which is like the stunning visual storytelling, which is just so goddamn beautiful, you can't take your eyes off it. That's really where it comes in. But I am going to just be honest when I say that not that it was a little bit of a hook in the beginning, because my overall sentiments of the show are super positive and super strong, but it's not the best thing I've ever seen, and it's not the most groundbreaking story I've ever seen, but it's really well done. It works within a framework we're familiar with, but it offers something which is depth and just amazing prowess and understanding of the medium it's in, and that's why it's so enriching and so fulfilling, especially in a year where I feel like all I've watched was terrible things. So it really does amplify that. And yeah, the characters are super thought out too, which makes it forgivable, very forgivable, that it is in this sort of like D&D fantasy mold. But my second point on that D&D topic is, yeah, it is about a video game. So I think it's great that it feels like it's a video game being told in not live action, but in scripted storytelling. Because it doesn't have to be like it doesn't have to not feel like a video game when it's literally based off one. And I think that's why it's just probably the best video game adaptation I've seen, because they recognize the medium that they're coming from, but they also really did a good job of translating it to the medium that they're now trying to be in. And so it's like kind of like a perfect culmination of not forgetting where you came from, aka the video game sphere, which is why it feels very like we're going from every episode feels to me like a level, like we got from point A to point B without dying. So now we're going to start the next level, which is episode 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. But I think it's like amazing because it's like a great video game like Skyrim or The Witcher, where you could spend some time just going through the main story and get through it quickly. But if you stop and you speak to the side characters, maybe have some dinner at like a little kiosk, you might get to hear this amazing story about like the innkeeper's daughter, and eventually go and rescue her and fight like one of the smaller dragons in the game that you would never have found. But there's that there. There is that extra element, that extra depth, which is what I think makes this show so charming and so great, because it simultaneously has something for everyone. Does that
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah, I get where you're coming. I get where you're coming from. Definitely went in a completely different direction than I was thinking. But hey, that's what we get when we actually when we get Chris back on the show, and that's why I love co-hosting this show with you. Look, all I know is like I said, I know nothing about the video games, but I've talked a lot recently about like kind of video game adaptations and kind of the problems of a lot of the more recent ones I've been having. Right? It's ironic because obviously kind of the only big example that we had to talk about from this year was Mortal Kombat, but I also did watch the new Resident Evil movie as well, and that one I thought was actually like an example of like what happens when you're like almost too close to the game, but I guess in some sense it still makes it better than like most of the other things that came out this year. Because
Side
hey,
note, quick yes or no, is that worth watching on a
honestly,
rainy day?
I had fun. I had fun with it. I had fun with it. I wouldn't say that it
Okay.
was anything amazing, but and you'll recognize all the faces, like the typical pretty CW looking, like washed out faces, and it makes no sense why they still look that good, even when they're being attacked by like zombies and everything. But I thought it was fun. I thought it was worth it. It had a goofy, fun, dumb CG climax. And I guess I'm kind of bringing that back to Arcane, right? I think that because you're right about the structure, right? Because you're totally 100% right. This is not necessarily something groundbreaking and new that you haven't seen before, as far as kind of like the whole D&D like fantasy approach to it, right? I think that fantasy storytelling is making a big comeback now on the streaming services between all the different series that they're greenlighting, between The Witcher on Netflix now with Wheel of Time and the success that that's having on Amazon. You're kind of seeing this new foray into that front. And honestly, if there's one thing that Game of Thrones proved, obviously, in its run, it's that there is still a massive appetite for fantasy storytelling after Lord of the Rings kind of seemingly killed it off in movies for a long time, right? And just given the vast scope of stories that we just feel like just are not giving us the escapism from real life that we so desperately need, whether it's between like just a lack of craft or just a lack of imagination in general, right? I feel like fantasy is long overdue for a comeback, right? And I think, but for me at least, where the appeal of this comes from is the fact that, again, for me, knowing nothing about the video games, how it's able to take these characters, give us like one of the most tragic stories that we've seen ever, presented in animated form, while at the same time kind of using, like you said, those fantasy tropes to like really enhance like kind of like a basic story like beyond its normal realm. Because that's the thing about like all the stories that we love, right? We've talked about Campbell's Journey how many times on this show now? Like great stories to me do not necessarily have to be brand new and groundbreaking all the time. They can play within structures that and kind of types that we've seen before. It's kind of like the basis of screenwriting, right? But what it is when it adds just that little twist to make it just a little bit extra that goes the total opposite direction that you're expecting, right? Because I mean, perfect example, right? The show starts off, you have like the main protagonists with Vi and Jigs. They're hanging out with like, they're the ruffians, they're robbing, and they're like, oh, okay, so this is gonna be a light, fun, cutesy story about, just them kind of, going whatever and just trying to survive as you learn more about the struggle between Zahn and Piltover, and just because of how our lizard brains have been geared to think, you're probably thinking that like, oh, something that they do is probably going to lead to some war, but they're going to be protected because they're the main characters. Nothing can happen to them, right? And then because of the well thought out actions and because of how well thought out these characters have been thought out by the writing team, right? Whether it has any basis in the League of Legends games or not, the directions that it goes in are beyond mind-blowing, to say the least. Like the end of the third episode to me goes in a direction that I did not see coming at all. Like for the first thing, like really in all of 2020, like shocked the hell out of me. It was like, whoa, okay, this is where we're going. And by the time you get into like the second act, right, of the show, because I mean, I'll get into that in a little bit when I talk about how Netflix's interesting decision around this release structure, right? And kind of how for the longest time, the interesting thing is that for the longest time with streaming services, right, it felt like every other streaming service was trying to borrow from Netflix. And now that Netflix is like kind of not at the top of the game anymore, now Netflix is kind of like having to borrow other things from these other streaming services as far as how they released it, right? They released the show, this first season, in 3 acts. They released 3 episodes at a time across 3 separate weeks for a total of 9 episodes. And where it goes once you're in the second act and once you see like how much time has passed, you're like, it's almost like you're watching like a completely different show within it, which is really something that I can't really say that I've gotten from any other show before. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree with everything you just said, and I think it's really interesting too. I know you started off speaking a little bit about Netflix and the marketing, and This is in, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here. I hadn't seen them employ a release strategy like this ever before.
No, never.
And it's a little strange considering, like, sure, you have like a few big names on the voice cast, but it's not like they're, physically there in person.
Right.
So it's a little strange to try something new on an animated show, especially if you're Netflix, where you said it at the start of this thing. They don't promote anything. Maybe they
Anything.
promote Stranger Things. That's about it, right?
Maybe.
Maybe. And maybe Cobra Kai now. But I
Maybe.
mean,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
outside
Cobra
of
Kai
those
can't
two,
escape from.
yeah, outside of those two, I've never seen a commercial or anything, and so basically, it's really strange that not only would they employ a new release strategy just out of nowhere without any sort of it's strange that they don't promote a new release strategy rather,
Right.
because that's usually a selling point, like, hey, watch this show once every 2 weeks, you get drops or whatever it was, right?
Right.
But then it's also strange that they do it with an animated show where, sure, there's faces attached to it, but it's not like it's like, oh, I look at that and I automatically know it's Haley Steinfeld, right? Like, you
Right.
see her character, but you don't
Yeah.
know who that is unless you look into it. And it's just really weird that they chose to do that with this show. But I think with the impact that this show has had on the zeitgeist, and as you called it, what did you call it, the interwaves? I like that.
Interwaves. Yeah, I make up a new word every single time it comes to the interwaves, interwebs. I use them all. I use them all interchangeably.
No, it's really good. I like
Yeah,
that.
dude. All I look, if there's one thing that Succession has taught me, is that words are literally just air that we're just funneling through. We can kind of just, as Marvel has told us time and time again, we're all words are made up. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Lessons
Like,
to be learned from everything,
yeah,
I
indeed.
suppose.
But I feel like that's a really good segue though into our next topic, which is
But
kind of
hang on, I wasn't done. I wasn't done.
yeah.
I wasn't done. So basically, I think it's really strange that they decide to employ a new release strategy for this animated show that, I mean, clearly the budget's high, but it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like they cared because they barely marketed it. And it's just the most strange part is how impactful it was. And I really would be, I mean, look, if Netflix was a normal company that somehow wasn't in debt since their inception, yet keeps gaining new subscribers, like, none of that makes sense already. So if they were a normal company, I would say this is it. They're going to change the game up, and they're going to approach this
Again.
release strategy again. Yeah, they're going to approach the release strategy of new shows going forward like they did Arcane. But for all we know, this could be a one and done. But the one thing we do know is it worked, because I
It
think it
worked.
kept popping up. And in the little free time I had over the past month, one thing I kept seeing was the fall of Squid Game out of the top 10, and then just Arcane consistently being in there. And when the new drops would come, it'd go from like 6 or 7 to 1 or 2. Then it'd go back down a few days and it'd go back up. And it worked. I think it just kept feeding it in people's faces. So I'm curious. I'm really curious to see where they go with it. There's just so much that is strange about Netflix going into 2022 and this show. It's just a lot of weird but good things. I don't know, man.
Well, I feel like that was we kind of like already segued into our next topic, which is why exactly this is blowing up all over the place, right? Because I had a lot of questions about that just in general, because the strange thing is that this is not necessarily the first time that Netflix has employed this strategy within this year, but it is the first time that they've employed this strategy for a TV show, because for the most part, right, Netflix's model since their kind of inception is drop all the episodes at once. Nothing gets split up over time. That was what made them revolutionary in the beginning. But obviously over the last couple of years, as all these other streaming services have popped up, HBO Max, Disney Plus, Amazon finally like actually getting onto the level that they need to, Hulu and all that, and Hulu's acquisition of FX and everything. And kind of, again, like how all those streaming services have kind of pulled you back into like the traditionalist like streaming model, where usually they'll start off, they'll release like a couple of episodes, like 2 or 3 episodes, and then they'll release the rest week to week, right? HBO still does that. HBO Max occasionally does it weird. Sometimes they'll do 2 weeks, sometimes they'll do 3 a week. So I think that just with this specific season in general, I think they kind of saw the writing on the wall as far as the kind of the other streaming services and how they were employing their other release strategies. And Netflix knows that they're not top dog anymore. I think the reason why they kind of so flaunted their kind of, confusing business model, to say the least, over the last couple of years, is because they really had no competition in that space. But 2021 kind of be in the 2020 kind of be in the precursor, but 2021 really being the first year that they had some actual real competition in the streaming space, I think caused them to reconsider a few things. But there's also a couple other factors that we're not considering here. One, the fact that they already kind of litmus tested this strategy with the Fear Street trilogy when that dropped. Was that this year or last year? I legitimately don't remember.
That was this year.
That was
Yeah,
this year.
bit
Where they
different because
dropped.
it's movies, but you're right. It was
Yeah,
very,
exactly. So they dropped those 3 movies across like a period of 3 weeks, right? So that was in a weird way, almost like a litmus test strategy. And of course, us, we didn't even realize it. The other thing that I'm wondering too, as far as kind of the impact that this had, obviously, is just the gaming aspect of it in general. Because I've been talking about this for a little bit now this year. I honestly wish I'd gotten a chance to talk about it more, which is that the gaming community, it really is like the most underrated and undervalued kind of community within like the gaming aspect, which is crazy because if you're in that community, you understand they're like those fans are like more rabid, more consistent, and like more like willing to shell out for their products than like any horror fan, any Star Wars fan, any Marvel fan, like anything. Like the video game crowd to me puts like the nerd fandom crowd within movies and comic books to shame. Really. So the fact that the studios are really only now starting to grasp at the level of IP that they have on their hands, right? And you're starting to see this more as you see more of an inclusion of video game and video game concepts and video game storytelling within a decent amount of movies and TV shows that we've gotten this year. But this one being the first one to get it right. And also the fact that Riot Games, from everything that I've heard, Riot Games was all about doing this the right way, just in general. And I don't actually know like the effect that they may have had on it, but the whole thing is that they were looking for this to be like the most watched thing. They weren't looking for this to be just another like disposable Netflix drop whole thing. So I'm wondering if they had any impact on that. Like I said, it's nothing that I can really confirm or deny because I haven't done any research or extenuating reading into it, but I'm just wondering if that has something to do with it.
yeah. Well, let me read you this stat here that comes from Vulture. The gaming industry is now number 2 on the market, but still behind in the television industry in regards to billions grossed each year. So since their inception, they've been around far shorter time than books, newspapers, subscription video on demand, magazines, and radio, and yet gaming combined puts up more money each year than all those mediums together, only behind TV by 200 billion. And I'm looking at this chart, and it seems they've only gone up in the past 20 years by
There
billions
you
each
go.
year. So it's a very
I
undervalued, and I'd say sort of because it's always going to be there, right? People are always going to want to sink their teeth into hours of a game. So I feel like it's the thing in geometry, right? It's a given where people don't really take for granted the luxury they have having an audience that is gamers. I feel like it's just like, oh well, they'll always be there. Well, not true, because if you make a
Not
bad
true.
game, they're going to go away. And not to say that film and TV, like how many hours have we sunk into watching movies and TV shows, right?
Too much. Too much.
But apparently the statistics show that gamers are doing more than the film and TV people in regards to paying and patronage and consuming TV. So yeah, I think it only makes sense that we've been seeing a lot more crossovers. You obviously have like the forefathers of the crossovers, like your Mortal Kombats and your Resident Evils, that sort of paved the way for like gaming making its transition into the film and TV industry. But I'm glad that there's a bunch popping up now, because I feel like we're finally getting past like the learning curve phase where we've been let down by the Assassin's Creeds of the world. And now we're starting to get some really great stuff like Arcane, and the Halo trailers, to my surprise,
Yeah, they look great.
they look good. They look good. I love Halo with all my heart, and it is my favorite video game of all time, side note. So I don't want to say it looks great because I've been hurt already so many times by Halo since about 2016 when they started to go downhill. So I don't want to fully succumb, but they do look good. I'll say they look good, and inside I know they look great, but I only want to say they look good. But yeah, where I was going with that was, you're right. It is pretty astounding to see like the hold gaming has on the world and the amount of money that's coming into it. And so League of Legends, right? Let's talk about them and the company.
Well, I mean, real quick, I wanted to bring up one more point before you transition to that, because I mean, just look at everything that we went through last year, where people were shut inside. I mean, last year, like I said, is the perfect example. I mean, I've said this primarily. Usually, when I make this point, I usually talk about this as regards to movies and television, and kind of like the more like the transition towards streaming and more at home, more emphasis on at home content rather than theatrical content. But I really feel like this goes across the board for really a lot of other things, not just related to the media space and storytelling in general, but really everything. Which is that, to me, the pandemic in 2020 as a year all it did was accelerate a bunch of things that were already kind of happening, just slowly but surely, right? It accelerated the push of Disney Plus. It accelerated Apple TV. It accelerated, obviously the move towards more virtual and online work. It accelerated the process, even though it hasn't really begun yet, but it's definitely accelerated the process of automating a large automation of the workforce, right? That's not really what we need to go into right now, but just as far as like covering some of the general stuff. And it accelerated to me, like, again, like the emphasis on like kind of like, again, a big point of storytelling that was just missing, which is, again, you're doing long form, more serialized, more kind of game-like tactics within your storytelling in order to continue to find new ways in order to sucker people in week to week when the tried and true formulas in storytelling are not going to work. Gee, you only have literally an entire fucking untapped market, which has only gotten bigger and more profusive in the last like 5 years alone, as far as just the different graphics engines and tactics and different kind of modes of storytelling that video game developers and storytellers and companies have began to implement into their software. And then you add to that a year where people were stuck in their houses with literally nothing to do, and all they had to do was watch stuff and play games. It's like, it's just common sense to me, as far as like this was kind of inevitable after the year of 2020 that we just had, but that's kind of really all that we have to say as far as like kind of why this was blowing up. But yeah, so League of Legends, Chris, talk about it. I know nothing about the origin. I know that the only thing I know is that this was a prequel. So talk about it. What exactly is League of Legends? Is this an improvement over the game? What does this add to the game? Like, talk about it.
Sure. Yeah. So you're right. While all the other industries halted last year, gaming didn't,
Yeah.
and League of Legends certainly didn't. I haven't played since about 2014. I played the first year it came out. It's what you would call a top-down MOBA game. And let me look up the exact definition of MOBA here so we get it right. But it's sort of like a grand strategy game. It's called a multiplayer online battle arena. So what that means is it's not your traditional game where you have a choice to play a story mode and then play online competitively. It's just online competitively. There is no story mode. And back when I was playing, there might have been, when you select the characters, like, have you ever seen like a Magic the Gathering card, Dom?
Yes.
Or like a Yu-Gi-Oh card, like in the bottom, there's like that little, like the flavor
like
text.
A Pokemon cards. Yeah, like the little like kind of gaming stats for each individual character. Yeah.
Well, there's the stats, and then at the very bottom of the card, there's like usually like a 1 to 2 sentence that like gives you like a little nerdy
like,
sort of like
little like description of the character. Yeah.
There might have been that. There might have been that when you would play in the character selector for League of Legends back then. But maybe not even. I really remember nothing about the characters. I just remember it being a very visually stunning game, which I think is part and parcel with the way the show looks. I mean, the animation in the game, for the type of game it is, does not have to be that good. It's not really a kind of game that you would play because you want an immersive, sort of enriching storytelling and visually stunning experience. It's kind of like I'd say it's called modern chess, which is ironic because Riot Games created a type of video game called something chess. It's like a digital chess or battle chess, and so these are like sort of board games on steroids is how I describe it. So the fact that they had this visual prowess and the fact that they sort of have all these characters that have this amazing design, it's sort of a bonus because really all they needed was the characters to have interesting mechanics to make sure that one could counter the other and that you could design a team and mix and mesh characters for the ultimate combination and make sure it's balanced and you can win the chess game against other players. So back when I was playing, that's all you thought about. That's all you cared about, which is why I say this. I played for about 3 years. I think it was season 1 to season 4. I think each year is a season. I might have tapped out sort of halfway through season 4. Life gets busy. You know the deal.
Yep.
And
during our CW superhero phase.
Right. And then Arrow and Flash started popping up. So I had to go. I could only put my time in so many
You had
places.
other priorities. Back in the Duchess days.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had never spoken to my friends ever about what is Xerath's backstory or what is the deal with so-and-so, right? I never thought to do that. I was like, okay, yeah, these guys look cool. I like him. He's fun. He's got lightning. I'll use him.
Right.
He floats. I don't know why he floats, but they never explained why he floated.
How's that the type of game that you're not getting involved in it for the characters?
You're involved in it for the highly competitive nature. You want to be in the upper tier. You want to win. It's a game of strategy. There's different types of moves you can employ. Like it's like in football that you can literally run plays, and that's why it is, like, I'd say the number one. It was at one point in time the number one competitive online game of all time in the gaming industry. It's up there with like Counter Strike and StarCraft and all those other grand strategy games, which you don't care about the story in. So they kind of had, like, at least from when I tuned out, a perfectly blank canvas to tell a story on. And I wonder if they have introduced story elements into the game since, because it's a prequel, right?
Right.
And I don't know why they chose it to be a prequel. I don't really know what that means. Now, I haven't played in so long that I don't recognize any of the characters in the show. I don't know if you can play as Vander or Powder. I don't know, to be honest with you. I haven't seen them. I don't really remember seeing many humans, but I don't remember any story. So that's why it's so brilliant that this game, which is, by the way, the number one most played game on the internet right now, still to this day, and it's had that title since 2014, which is unreal because it completely broke the conventional 20 to 30 years prior video games, which was narrative story first and immersive experience first, competitive nature later. Like, it kind of broke us out of that. The whole 2010s really changed the landscape of the gaming industry, which I think brought a lot more money into it, making it more competitive and more interactive. You can have prize pools, you can have different teams that get sponsors and endorsed. Like League of Legends, I think is a huge part of like why they're. I don't know if you know this. I don't really. Whatever. I think it's kind of crazy as a gamer. They're talking about potentially having the Olympics have a gaming
Oh,
category now,
really?
and the debate
I
is,
think I
yeah.
did hear rumblings about that, but
I heard it on NPR, dude. The debate
at this
is,
point, it's not. At this point, nothing's out of the question for me.
yeah, it's unreal. And the debate is, do we do it in the winter or the summer? Right? That's
Well, I
like what
mean,
they're trying to figure out.
don't they already have
So,
like gaming like championship games for this sort of thing?
so League of Legends actually is insane because they were the first, and they might have been the only so far video game company to sell out Madison Square Garden. They
That's
literally
crazy.
have enough.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they hosted for a few years. They hosted their championship in Madison Square Garden. Like, Imagine Dragons played, because I mean, Imagine
Right,
Dragons
because
is
Imagine
like,
Dragons, that's the other thing.
they're
Right,
in the show at one point.
Imagine Dragons is literally like a huge part of like the League of Legends lore, apparently, which is crazy. Like, I heard the theme song and I'm like, oh, cool, Imagine Dragons. And for whatever reason, like my brain like kind of did that like conjoining act. I'm like, oh yeah, I do vaguely remember like Imagine Dragons being into some video game at some point. I just didn't realize it was this one. And then I see them actually in the show. I'm like, God damn, how involved are these guys?
Yeah, they play apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know how good they are because I mean they seem like busy guys,
Right.
but
From what I've heard, they've essentially become like the new Nickelback, which I still think is unfair because I still don't know what originally happened to like the hate around Nickelback in general. I mean, you're a music guy, so you'd probably know more about that than me. But they're kind of just like that band that like was super popular at one point, and then the next thing you know, they're like the most hated band. And I'm like, what the hell happened in between?
yeah. So I love. Side note, I love Nickelback. I've seen them in
Same.
concert. They're phenomenal. I think they're great. One of the first two songs my parents recall me my ears perking up to when they were on the radio. The first was Smash Mouth's All Star. The second was How You Remind Me by Nickelback. And to this day, I still love Nickelback. I mean, there's a reason they get hated. It's because they wrote so many hits that it just drove people crazy. And hey, look, they're hit doctors, and so is Imagine Dragons. I think they're a fine band. I really don't hate them at all. But it's just crazy to think that like this game, which is a free to play game, by the way, that's even the crazier part. So it's like you have Netflix doing a revolutionary, groundbreaking model. League of Legends kind of did the same thing. Like, you could play for free. Back when this first came out in 2011, 2010, there were some, but they were few and far between. The good ones were few and far between, that weren't just like, hey, play this game for free, and then in the in-game marketplace, if you actually want to be better, you have to buy this, that, and the other thing with actual dollars. Like, no. You don't have to spend money on League of Legends unless you want to. You can literally just play for free because they know the advertising is just so strong. So it really is an anomaly what Riot Games has done. And then they have this
Right.
other shooter right now called Valorant, which is highly competitive, and they're just everything they've touched has been successful. I think Arcane is a great reflection of that. And it's just mind blowing to think that like, probably because of League of Legends and this company Riot Games, without them, would we be talking about gamers sat on a stage and played League of Legends on Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, sold out? like multiple
That's
days in a row. Because a championship you can't get done in one day.
no.
It's like a full tournament.
Yeah.
Unreal, dude.
That's unbelievable. Like that.
Yeah.
That might be of all the like the most surprising things that I found out upon like coming into this podcast. That was like the last thing that I was absolutely expecting. Like because I've watched Entourage. Entourage like poked fun at this. Like they poked fun at every single aspect of the entertainment industry. But like never was I expecting like something this big. Like they have a moment in that show where Turtle ends up going with like some video game tournament in LA. They don't really specify where, and he gets his ass handed to him by like a 10-year-old kid. It's fucking hilarious. It's fucking hilarious. But yeah, like I wanted to bring it down and bring it back now and just talk about the characters briefly because we hinted at that like a little bit before. We talked a little bit like kind of about the impact of the League of Legends games. We talked about the kind of the Netflix release strategy and kind of how this kind of ended up blowing up. But I want to talk about these characters because, Chris, I don't think that I've fallen in love with. Yeah.
Before we do that, didn't you have something you wanted to ask the audience or something like that?
Oh, you mean about your little, what percentage of people are not subscribed versus subscribed?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we're gonna do that now.
Of course. Well, I mean, well, here's the thing. I don't know why you were setting me up for it because I'm like, dude, that's your thing. Yeah, I don't ever want to step on your thunder there.
Okay, so I just typed it in, and that's worse than I thought. Wow, the numbers have gone up. So the data's come in for 2021 now. This is crazy, Dom. 98% of all subscribers on YouTube since returning to normal are not 98% of viewers on your channel since returning to normal are not subscribed. What the hell? Guys, if there's so many, that means there's so many of you watching this right now who aren't subscribed. And as we said at the start of this thing, one hacked Instagram is not going to keep us down. Follow the new one, by the way, at the official Talkin' TV podcast. Whoever hacked us, fuck you guys.
Yeah. Fuck you and your fucking phishing schemes and everything.
Yeah. And by the way, I hope none of you fell for that. We apologize, even though we had nothing to do for it and nothing to apologize for. We just feel bad because that sucked. And so follow the new Instagram at the official Talkin' TV podcast. But really what we're talking about is the fact that 98% of you are unsubscribed. If you like watching this show, which apparently a lot of you do because you're here right now, and we've been doing this for so long that it makes sense that we would keep going. If we didn't have an audience, why would we do it? No, we're passionate. We'll do it either way. But just subscribe, guys, because we want to grow. We have a lot of plans for the new year. We're going to be back in action and better than ever, and we want you to be a part of it. So hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, turn the bell on for notifications, and yeah, if you're the hackers, don't do any of that because we hate you with all of our hearts.
Absolutely. We hate hackers here in general. Hackers not allowed.
We're not talking about hacks, so no. I don't want to talk about hackers.
Yeah, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about that show. But yeah, so Chris, I mean, where do you even want to start with this? Because like I said, it's kind of crazy because like I've heard so many different comparisons made about these characters. Because I really think that like what they did here with these characters specifically, like and just as far as the world goes, but like what they did with these characters is insane. Because you have literally like every different like kind of character type and trope pulled from pretty much like every single form of like online and recent like pop culture, sci-fi, fantasy, like iotas and years. You have the scheming politicians, you have the abrasive young upstart student who ends up getting in way over their head, you have the old cautionary mentor, you have the evil like mustache twirling villain who's got a tragic backstory. You've got the warm fuzzy mentor who's also a badass. You've got like the group of kids, like literally, and you could write an entire fucking book on all of the character tropes that you see in this show. And it amazes me. Like, how do they do this? How do they make me simultaneously love and hate a character like Jinx and also make her like one of the most interesting and engaging? It's so funny too because I'm like, I literally saw that. I think that probably one of the most accurate comparisons I've seen online is how the relationship between Silco and Jinx is literally like Joker and Harley Quinn, but like portrayed realistically, quote unquote. Very much so. Like I didn't want to be that guy, but it makes a lot of sense when you look at it like that.
The one thing I'll say is I was watching, I think it was episode 5 when you're really getting Silco and Jinx's adult relationship.
Yeah.
And I was like,
it's tricky to say the least.
It's a little creepy. And also I was thinking to myself, I don't necessarily know if this correlates. Like, I don't see how she went from that to this. I know she's been through tragedy and trauma, probably has PTSD from the events that happened. She bears the weight of it. But I don't know how it didn't. That's the one thing that so far, and full disclosure, I have 3 episodes left, 7, 8, and 9. That's the one thing so far. I've seen the first 2 acts. That's the one thing so far that I just. I hope they justify it. It doesn't feel quite as justified. It feels a little unwarranted. But real quick before we get too far away from it, then I want you to take over again. Yeah. You're speaking about everything this show has, and how could you forget trade disputes? I mean, I grew up on trade disputes.
They got the trade disputes is right. You got the jump, man. I was so hoping you were going to
Yeah.
bring that up. That's hilarious. Oh,
Yeah,
my
man.
God. But yeah, so all that I'll say is without spoiling the ending, because I've seen the entire thing twice now. Literally, no joke. I was chilling at my
Wow.
friend's house in Rochester, and I was like, have you guys watched Arcane? It's crazy to me. I don't think I've ever seen this happen before, where one of my friends at my job was badgering me about it, and I wasn't quite sure, because I'm like, look, the trailer was dope, but I don't want to get let down. I'm kind of busy. I'm kind of in the middle of something right now. And like 2 weeks ago or last week, whenever I watched this, I finally am like, yo, look, I got some spare time. I need to relax. I put on the first episode, blown away by the animation. But that was just the first episode, right? And the first episode is like kind of like the most, what's the word I'm looking for? The most easy to get across, the most palatable, the most like kind of the thing that you've seen before, right? So the most familiar. And then as the show goes on, and I'm just like more and more sucked into the story. And then you get past the first act with their kids and you see them like kind of grow up, because there's a spoiler alert, there is a time shift between the first and second acts between episodes 3 and 4. And then once you see it, right? And I was watching it with my friends last night, and by the time we were like 5 episodes in, and they were like, what the fuck is going on? I'm like, I know, right? When is the last time that a show has done something like this? And without spoiling anything, I will say that the ending, I think, pays everything that the show is building to off in all of the best ways. Everything with Silco, everything with the Piltover Zahn struggle, everything with Jason Victor that's going on, everything with, obviously, with Vi and Jinx. I guess if I can say one thing, it's that I'm a little bit perturbed at that of all of the cliffhangers that we get. I wanted to see a little bit more from the Vi and Jinx thing, because the problem is the majority of the second act, they're apart and you don't see them together until the end. And so by the time it comes back around for the third act, there's a little bit that gets left off the table. But with the way that they ended and the way that they end, I have never seen a harder tune in next time for season 2 that has me so amped and wanting more. Like I've not seen that. And I cannot say that I've seen that for any other show so far this year. And I can say right now,
you're saying you felt like too much of their, and again, I'm about to start the third act, but you're saying too much of their repairing of the relationship happened off screen.
That's where okay, so that's where I'll say, okay, I may have misspoken there. Repairing of relationship, none of that is anywhere to be found. None of that is anywhere to be found. There is, but that's a problem. I'm trying to think of another example, but I literally can't think of it, because I'm like, I know I've seen shit like this before.
See, that's like, the thing about this show.
Like the two like, okay, you know what? Perfect example, right? Not exactly the same type, but perfect example, right? The relation, for all my Avatar The Last Airbender fans out there, the relationship between Ozai and Sozin back in the day that ended up leading to the 100-Year War, how the two of them were like best friends when they were younger, and then as they grew apart because of this rift, different scenarios for what causes the rift. But like the circumstances behind it are so complex, so well thought out. You understand where each of the characters are coming from, even if you can't necessarily buy into it. Like you understand justifiably so why Vi is pissed at Powder at the end of that act 1, you know, and kind of where that leads, because the whole red herring is that you think that the Powder character is going to go in one direction, right? You think that she's just a precocious kid, and then by the time you get into act 2, when she's like grown up and she becomes Jinx, you're like, oh no, this character was doomed from the start. And it's funny because at first I thought it was going to be like a little bit of an Anakin Skywalker shift. But then as time went on, I'm like, oh no, this is like a better, more well thought out, more damaged Harley Quinn arc. Because the thing, and the reason why I add all those kind of caveats, is because Harley Quinn, for the most part, over the years, has become a lot more of like a pop culture, like kind of revolutionary character, and as a result has kind of like undergone this weird, strange, transitionary, like oh my god, what's the word I'm looking for? A redemption arc, where she ends up kind of becoming more of a force of, more of an anti-hero rather than a straight-up villain, the way she was when she was first introduced in the Batman animated show. And this is not that at all. Like, at all. Like, by the time you see where Jinx ends with this, she's a full-on villain. And I wanted to point out the opening credits, too, in order to tie it back to Imagine Dragons, right? Because I don't think I'm spoiling anything here, but the Imagine Dragons opening intro with the graphics and kind of how it lays out beautifully visually all the characters and all the kind of the arcs is where it's going to go, right? The ending shot of that with Vi versus Jinx, I'm waiting for that. That's all I'm going to say. I'm waiting for that. And when it comes, it's going to be fucking mind-blowing and amazing. That's all I'm going to say with that.
So, you know, it's funny. I think there's another storytelling medium we forgot to sort of bring up earlier when we were talking about how this translates from the game to the screen. We talked about film, we talked about TV, right? And the cosmogenic cycle and Campbell and the hero's journey. But the intro and the way that they sort of flesh out the world and the characterizations, it does have a little bit of anime in there as well.
Little bit.
Because if you watched, I know you read Naruto. Did you watch it by any means?
Never watched it, no. But I think I know where you're going with this, with Naruto and Sasuke.
Yeah, because in the intro, you know that's going to happen in the first episode if you watch the credits, if you watch the theme song.
Right.
because they do that typical sort of, and I
Right.
never knew.
Visually laying out the story without actually telling
Yeah.
you it and setting you up for it without you even realizing it.
And you think, is that just a cool shot, or is that something that's going to happen? But then as
Right.
you watch enough of these types of
Right.
properties that employ that opening sequence, opening theme song sequence tactic, and I always thought that was a strange tactic. But yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So that's kind of where we're going.
Right.
And it did, but I think sometimes it works when you have a story that is so cut from the cloth of the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell's work that it, at least while you're watching, it keeps you thinking. And I think that's something you want to do when something is this well done. And what I mean by that is when something is so perfectly fit into the mold of the hero's journey, it almost in a sense can let your guard down, and almost in a sense can make you tune out and not pay as much attention or give it as much respect as maybe it deserves, because the hero's journey is such a format that we are so familiar with. So it does make sense to me, that choice, that creative choice to show that shot at the end. And I think it actually kind of has helped keep my attention, and really that was only needed for the first 2 episodes, as it wasn't very
Right.
cut and dry.
Right.
Now I'm invested. Now I'm in. We've got this higher level politics going on now. We have these trade disputes, which are very interesting, actually have stakes. As much as I love the
Yes.
prequels, and I will defend them until I die, and possibly on debates as we get back into those in the new
Oh,
year.
please do. Please
Spoiler
do.
alert.
Trade dispute and Phantom Menace. Legitimate plot point or bullshit. Let's make that a thing.
We got to do that in May. Holy
Oh, we have to.
crap.
That's our May the 4th thing.
Yeah. Honestly, we're gonna break the internet. I can't
Broadcasting
wait.
live on the podcast again. I love it. But real quick, to bring it back
But,
to that
hold
point.
on, hold on.
Yeah.
Because you said something that was so perfectly the way I feel about this show, where you almost said something where you're like, it's simple, but it's not that simple. And
Right.
that's the beauty of this show.
Right. It
you know?
uses base-born storytelling tropes and tactics that you've seen before, but it uses them the right way, and it uses them to play around with your expectations. Like visually, you see all those characters and you know exactly where they're going to go, and then the show twists and plays around with those expectations right in front of you. And I love when things do that. I love it. That's my
Yeah.
shit.
For sure, man. So, I mean, while we're in this topic, I don't really know how much more I can add to it.
I did have one more thing that I wanted to bring up, which is that because this is the first thing, like in quite possibly this entire year, that I've rewatched. Like I've watched this entire show now twice, and I literally don't think I've done that with any other show, any other thing that I've seen so far this year, except for maybe the Suicide Squad. I think, and Dune. I think that those are it. And literally, I watched this entire thing twice, and like it's so funny because like people talk about Easter eggs and shit all the time, but really in the modern day pop culture landscape in the era of Marvel, right? Kind of whenever people talk about Easter eggs, what they're really talking about is the story that you're watching just blatantly halting for like 5 minutes just to point out to something from another property that the fans will know, but it's just completely like apropos to the actual like mode of where the story's going. And this show, besides not doing that, kind of upon a rewatch, what's amazing to me is seeing all the kind of like the quote unquote Easter eggs, only because I can't think of another word to really describe it, as to like kind of setting up to where the show is going to go, kind of using the Pavlov's gun technique in the most brilliant of ways possible. Like all the stuff that like in the first act, like just with the dialogue exchanges between Vi and Powder working on her little bombs and everything obviously that's going on with that Milo's talking about, all of that is set up and paid off in all the best ways as far as that goes. And I really can't say that I've seen that from any other thing this year in general. And like I know that that's something that should really be in everything, but considering just how bland and mediocre and awful, and just how seemingly all the creative stuff that's come out this year is seemingly forgotten, like the base-born like methods of storytelling, it's just so refreshing to actually see it done and done well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why, our good friend Professor Pat likes the show so much. It's really a masterclass in 3-act storytelling.
Yes.
And especially 3-act storytelling over the medium of television, which is sometimes muddied and hard to follow and sometimes non-existent. Sometimes it's just, let's just keep pushing it forward and forward and forward till the end of the season, and it gets you there, but it doesn't have this beautiful interwoven narrative that makes storytelling so rich. And I think the show does that, and that's why it's really cool.
Yeah.
For me at least.
Yeah. Only thing that I wanted to point out before we get into final thoughts and star ratings is just a couple of fan theories. Because again, this is how into this thing that I am. This is the first thing that I've actually like done YouTube deep dives on, like video analyses on essays and like different things and different references to the greater League of Legends lore and everything. So all that I'm going to say is, as far as like potentially a couple of other things, like I said, I won't spoil anything directly for the end because I know you haven't hit the third act yet. And like I said, when you see where this show ends, it is gangbusters to say the least. All I'm going to say is that as far as setting up a future League of Legends thing, right? So there is hints that they're going to bring back Vander as the werewolf character Warwick. That has been strongly hinted at. There are hints to Echo and his time traveling abilities, and there are also other hints to newer characters that Madara's mother, who is introduced as well, will bring in as well. So those are like just a couple of things as far as where they could go. Also, the fact that I know for a fact that Piltover and Zaun are not the only cities and regions that we see in this world, so I'm assuming we're going to see more of that as well, because Riot Games did officially confirm almost like the week after Act 3 aired that they were already hard at work on Season 2 and that would be coming out sometime in 2023. So all I know is, once again, we're left in that same position that all of us television fans hate to be left in, which is where, wow, we have to wait a fucking year for our thing. In a strange way, I do kind of miss like kind of the old school television model where we would get a little bit in the fall and a little bit in the spring, and then we would only have to wait like 3 or 4 months till the fall again before we would get more. But hey, there's a reason why we don't necessarily get that, but it sucks. But hey, you know what? If it just makes the wait even better, and if it just makes the next product that we get even better, I'm all for it. So if I could just go into my final thoughts and ratings, and yeah, I'm gonna make some fucking heads roll here because I want to, because it's been a minute here. Yeah, this is the best thing that I've seen so far this year. And in a year where we've gotten Dune Part 1 and The Suicide Squad and Judas and the Black Messiah and Ted Lasso Season 2 and Succession Season 3, all of which to me are like at the absolute peak tier of what they're playing at. This to me is really the first thing where I got something that I truly was not expecting, which I cannot say about really anything else that I've seen so far this year. Absolutely impeccable craft, impeccable animation, made me care about a property and a region that I had no knowledge of or really no care for at all previously. Some of the best characterization, some of the best voiceover talents, really some of the best just of everything that I love. Like everything that I love about storytelling in general is featured here. And that's why, yeah, I'm saying it. Best TV show of the year. I'm already spoiling our top 10 best TV shows. Best thing of the year. This gets a 5 stars from me. Easily. No question.
Fair enough. Wow. It's a surprise, but it's also not, because when has an animated property not been your top thing of the year?
True, but like, you know what it is? I'm always looking for that one thing to continue to surpass me. And now at like the age that I'm at with how cynical I am, just as far as animation, again, I was out on Pixar for the longest time before Soul kind of resurrected my love of it. Pun intended, very much pun intended there. And so I'm always looking for like how they can continue to push the boundaries of animation forward. And for the most part, animation still seems to be that one thing where they do actually seem to have some vested interest in pushing the boundaries of what they can accomplish from a storytelling standpoint forward, which is something that a lot of the other mediums in filmmaking just don't seem to be interested in anymore.
Fair enough. Well said. Well said. Yeah. So for me, I'm loving this ride so far. I'm so glad I finally have free time. I plan to binge the rest of this, if not today, but by the end of the weekend. And yeah, I mean, man, this is a great show. It's just a masterclass on knowing your craft and on executing. I think a lot of things come into it with good intentions, with a solid foundation, a solid script, but then the end product isn't really what they might have hoped for. And I think this really is, like I said, a master class on knowing your craft, knowing your characters. I feel like you could sit these writers down, these creators down, these animators down, and you can ask them, what's to the left of that shop where once Vi gets out of jail? Like, what's down that street? And they can tell you. And you could sit there for hours and they could map out the whole city, or they could tell you the silliest question, Vi's favorite food or Vander's favorite, shirt to wear. Like, and that is very important in storytelling. And I feel like you don't have that too often anymore. And you have that here. I really can't wait to finish it. So because I haven't seen the ending, I think it's unfair to give it a 5, although I want to. So I'm going to give it a 4. And I will update you guys on our top 10. Another spoiler. I'm pretty sure it's going to be there for me. My final star rating.
I think it is. I think it is.
And I think it's going to be pretty high as well. But again, I can't speak to it since I haven't seen it. But Dom, you had seen one thing that you wanted to give some quick thoughts on?
Yeah, I did. I watched Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, which as of right now is the front runner for the Oscars race. Obviously stay tuned for more, obviously, throughout the rest of this month and into 2022 for my continued updates on the Oscars as we get closer to the ceremony. It's still way too late in the year as far as that goes, but I'm still looking forward to it. And yeah, I enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. For somebody who has never seen the original, never seen any of the properties it's based off of, other than just knowing that it's like one one of the biggest and best, like, musicals in Hollywood history, and also just the fact that it is like kind of the most well-known and well-received like adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. I freaking loved it. I love Spielberg's kind of take on it. I love that this is like the first thing that Spielberg like actually had some passion for in seemingly a while, after seemingly a decade of really kind of duds and really boring movies. I thought the acting was great all around. It was one of the first movie musicals that I've seen in a while that like I wasn't consciously thinking that it was a musical, and so therefore kind of like the inherent nature and hokiness of movie musicals didn't really bother me. The song numbers were incredible. The performances, from what I've heard, the comparisons from the performances to the original, where they actually received more praise in this one than they did in the original, which I think is kind of insane. And I just wanted to point out to the stat that if this movie wins Best Picture, it'll be the first time ever in history that a remake of a movie that already previously won Best Picture will have also won Best Picture. So I just wanted to point out that stat as well, just as far as the Oscars in this vicious cycle of repetition. But yeah, would heavily recommend. Enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. And yeah, like I said, if you're familiar with the story, it's not really something that you're going to watch because you necessarily like want something new and really engaging. But yeah, I had an absolute blast with this, and I can't wait to see what this movie's Oscar chances are. As far as like acting talent goes, Rachel Zegler and Ariana DeBose for me are locks for actress and supporting actress. This movie is definitely getting picture, director, and adapted screenplay nominations. As far as what it wins, that's still a little bit too soon to tell. But stay tuned for our Oscars coverage throughout the first third of 2022, leading up to the Oscars, for more updates on that.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like we should almost end this podcast with AC/DC's Back in Black, but
yeah, right.
Copyright strike.
If only for avoiding those copyright strikes.
This was great, man. I'm really excited. I can't wait for the new year. We have a lot planned for you guys, but Dom and I are going to be working pretty intensely to figure out some new things for the show that we hope make it better and more enjoyable for you guys, and some ways that we can not only get back on track, but pick up the pace even. So we'll just stick with us. Like we said, one hacked Instagram and a messy return to normalcy won't keep us down.
Yes, indeed. But with that being said, people, that's our review and recap of Arcane, League of Legends, Netflix. And Chris, I just wanted to point out one more stat before we got out of here. Watch Mojo, a channel that famously I have been in and out of for the last couple of years, right? Ever since they were kind of like my introduction into YouTube, right? Watch Mojo just released their top 10 best TV shows of 2021. I thought it was a little bit of a misnomer label because they named it best TV shows of 2021, but they only hit debuts from 2021, which I think does a little bit of a disservice to some of the better.
That is?
Yeah. Clickbait, yeah, but I think it does a little bit of a disservice to some of the amazing returning shows that we got this year, like Ted Lasso season 2, like What We Do in the Shadows season 3, like Succession season 3. But we did get a lot of great, incredible debuts this year. But Arcane was their number one, and we know that Watch Mojo's a sucker for those internet trends. But still, just the fact that shows what kind of juice this show has ultimately. So that was our review and recap of Arcane, League of Legends. If you haven't watched it yet, it's right on Netflix. Go ahead and watch the first 9 episodes. It's the first Netflix thing that I'm confident in recommending to people. Obviously, I was a little bit late to the Squid Game train, obviously, because I didn't want to buy into the hype. But really, since Cobra Kai, honestly, earlier this year, I thought that Jupiter's Legacy was going to be it. I was sorely mistaken there, and I really should have seen the writing on the wall there. But hey, hindsight is 2020 and all that. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in to yet another episode of the Talking TV podcast. We only got 2 episodes left. We got 2 podcast episodes left of the year. We got Spider-Man next week, and we got Matrix the following week to wrap up 2022 before we come back strong in January with our best and worst of the year. Oh yeah, we're hitting it all. We got one more episode. Dustin and I are doing our recap of our Succession season 3 recap show this Thursday. We've got a couple more top 10 lists, a couple of Marvel things with a couple of familiar faces that you guys have seen on the channel before coming to you guys. Still so much content coming to you guys before the end of the year, and you guys can keep up with all of that by clicking the subscribe button, clicking the like button, clicking the bell next to the way you guys get notified every time we put up new content. Of course, like I said, following our brand new Instagram page at the official Talking TV podcast. Again, one hacked Instagram is not going to keep us down. Chris, where can the good people find you?
Yeah, they can find me at the same places they can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Christian Evanko. Evanko spelled Evanko. I'm out of hibernation. I'm coming back to life, coming back to the real world. So keep up to date with everything I do there through the link in my bio. Oh man, it's so good to be back. I just sigh of relief. Not just for show or theater either. It's good to be back. So yeah, please follow me, follow our new podcast page, and subscribe to the show and hit that bell so you never miss when we go live. But also, most importantly, follow my co-host, who's been so great about carrying the torch of the podcast through this last month and a half of the year, and he deserves all your support, and hopefully one day he will post again and come out of his social
Well, it's
media.
funny that you mentioned that because I have been posting a little bit frequently, and I did want to point out a couple of new things that I have posted on Facebook. So I'll just share those with you guys frequently. What's it called? So famously, right, back in November when we first watched the Eternals, I famously got a post that was blocked on Facebook for supposedly being a trolling thing. I guess that should show you where their priorities are. Simply because when I said that I'd watch the Eternals on Facebook, I said, people, we have a new Dark World kind of outline, and the fact that we have a new worst MCU list. On my caption for when I posted the first No Way Home trailer, when that posted a month ago, crazy that we've literally only gotten like the new trailer for that movie like a month ago, and I said, God damn it, show us Andrew and Toby, you cowards. Then when I posted about, like I said, it's been a little bit, but I'm trying to make up for lost time here. And then when I first posted, when I watched the premiere of Hawkeye back about a month ago, I said tracksuit mafia because I just thought that would be a little funny one-liner and a little riff. And then obviously when I posted about this show that we just finished talking about, Arcane, I said not only was this way better than expected, but more cinematic than pretty much every other movie this year, with the exception really of Suicide Squad, Judas, Dune, and Bond. I think that's a pretty fair comparison, I would say. Then last week with the Spotify rap thing, I posted this Spotify rap shit should be a national holiday at this point, because it basically is by social media standpoint.
That's pretty funny. So wait, you're posting on Facebook, not Instagram?
Yeah, these are on my Facebook page. No, the only thing that I posted
Got
recently
you.
on Instagram is I got another haircut. I posted finally like 2 months later, but some pictures of when I went down to New York City for the film festival. Literally like for the first time being in New York City in 2 years by that point. And
so
then obviously about the hack.
The hack. Speaking of hacks, this is where I was going with it.
Oh, really?
My Facebook got hacked earlier this year.
Really?
So,
okay.
The podcast Instagram got hacked. My personal Facebook got hacked. I can't log into my Facebook through the app. I recovered my original Facebook. I can go on desktop, but who's going to do that? So I didn't know you've been posting this whole time.
That would be
I don't use Facebook anymore. I have one.
Yeah,
but I don't use it because I got hacked.
I've been on Facebook since the beginning, so that's why, like, kind of old. And the most recent thing that I posted, this was the most recent thing, was the trailer for Adam McKay's new upcoming miniseries about the rise of the Lakers in the 80s. But it quite possibly has the worst title of any show that I've ever seen. It's called Winning Time, The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty, because apparently the original head of HBO, of content at HBO, who was responsible for that disastrous HBO Max release strategy, who was let go, was originally going to call the show Showtime, which obviously would create a little bit of contractual problem between, HBO's rival network, also entitled Showtime. But I'm like, guys, the title is literally right in front of you. You got a show about basketball, and you're not going to call it Game Time? What are you doing? But anyway, I missed the boat on that. That one's up on my Facebook. But you can follow all of my more sarcastic posts that I will attempt to bring more of to the fold on Facebook and Instagram at Movie Nerd Reviews, which still is hack-free. I hope I didn't jinx myself just right there. And as always, people, keep tuning in for more content. We're almost done with 2021. We'll see you guys back strong in 2022. 12 seasons of the short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.
And set up that 2-factor authentication.
That too.